Two, one. Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to Inside Movies Galore. Another exciting episode into what are we going to call this month? Are we going to call this Hell Month?
Month.
Dang.
Well, no,
This is a prelude to kaiju combat, technically.
So we got to go through hell to get to heaven, eh?
Yeah.
Right.
Technically, it's Kim's birthday week.
Yes.
We'll tear
Happy
your
birthday,
soul
Ken.
apart.
So, ladies and gentlemen, we Kim, Septum Sim's wife, has a birthday somewhere around here. When is it?
Tomorrow.
Tomorrow. Oh,
Yeah.
Crap. So, happy belated, happy early birthday to you. So tonight we are discussing two of her favorite films, and the first of which is filmed in 1987, and directed by Clive Barker, written by Clive Barker, and the screenplay is written by Clive Barker as well. And
Based on his short story.
Based on his short story.
Or technically novella, but
The Hellbound Heart, if I remember correctly. The Hellbound Heart.
I believe so.
Yeah.
So the basic gist of this is the fact that it's about an unfaithful wife who ends up bringing back her lover into the mix of her family, and what the family ends up dealing with this. And there's a puzzle box that's involved with this film. So before we get too far into the plot details, why don't we go with a first-time impression of this film from Kim herself? So, Kim, tell us about the first time that you had been subjected to this film.
Oh,
what a great way to put it.
Did you open up the box? Did you?
I remember, like, I was really young. I was under the age of 10 before the first time I saw the first movie. As some of you know, my brothers are much, much older than I am. Like, they were teenagers when I was born. So, and my mom, despite being a fundy, she allowed me to watch horror movies a lot. And this is one of the movies that we watched together. As long as I didn't watch any of the sexy stuff, which of course Hellraiser is all sex. It's all sexually tinged. So I didn't really watch this with her a whole lot. I watched it with my brothers though. Seriously, it scared the crap out of me, because this whole idea of, like, you have this puzzle box. And I remember the first time I saw a Rubik's Cube, I thought it was the Lament configuration. I was 7 years old. Yeah. So I don't know what it was. I mean, because I was really big into puzzles at that age. And I fell for these movies somehow. I thought Pinhead was a cool villain. And then when the second movie came about, I was like, oh, even better. I love this shit. So yeah, I was pretty young the first time I saw these films. I'm dating myself right now. I'm very old, as you guys may know. I'm in my 30s. Sorry. But yeah, I've been a fan of these films since I was young, and nothing bad. I hate the later sequels, except for the one with Henry Cavill.
Which one is that?
That was the one about the board game, or the video game. Sorry.
Okay. I've only seen the first three.
Oh, you are missing out. There's quite a few sequels.
I was told to avoid them.
Yeah, they're pretty bad. But the one with Henry Cavill, because it's Henry Cavill and he's faking an American accent for the first time, it's pretty fun. Superman himself.
So, who else wants to go? Septa, why don't you give us your testimony of defense?
Well, my first time watching it was a slight bit past the time that Kim first saw it. I wasn't really into horror movies until I was an adult, which is funny because I saw quite a few of them as a child, but not this one. I think if my father had tried to show me this one, my mother probably would have walked out on him at that point.
You mean she didn't walk on him when he showed you Eddie Murphy Raw and Scarface?
Or Chrome about 30
Shining.
times.
But this one, I was always curious about because Pinhead was a rather, it was well-known horror figure.
Right.
And I'm not quite certain when I first saw the film all the way through. I know it was before I started dating Kim because I had it before that. But I can't remember when I first saw it. It had to be in my late 20s, probably when I was in Emporia. But I remember seeing it and going, okay.
Well, that might have helped you when you were in Emporia. You could have looked out your window and seen just as bad as stuff. So
Yeah, there you go. So
Yes, seriously, people in suburbia are probably doing that kind of shit.
I was, like I say, I was numb to a lot of it by that point, so I was able to deal with it. But I think if I'd seen it just like maybe 5 years earlier, I probably would have been scandalized. But I'll admit, I started picking up more of an interest to it after getting together with Kim because she liked the films so much that I got to see them multiple times. Not as much as I've seen the beginning of the second film, but I have definitely, which is pretty much the ending of the first film.
Just the beginning? Oh, yeah, the recap.
So, I have to say, it was okay for me. It's kind of grown on me over the years.
Okay. Well, I was first introduced, about 10 years ago. I saw it for the first time. I missed it because I was born in '84 and this was out in '87. And my mom was like one of the most religious women around. So at least while I was growing up, so I could see no horror films. So I think that's why I've kind of grown to love horror films over the years. And I thought that this film was a hell of a lot more darker then, even though I recently saw it a couple of weeks ago, and then I resaw them again today for this. So seeing them again, I still love that scene between the floorboards. It's just gets me every time with the fucking spider looking like arms coming out of the floor.
That freaked me out when I was a kid too. That got to me. I was telling Brandon the other night, I'm like, oh my God, that's so creepy.
And the fact that it just goes just a few inches below the floor and you see the fucking heart body go around it, and then you start to see the brains, you're like, ew.
It reminds me of the cockroach scene from Nightmare on Elm Street Part 4 for some reason.
Ew.
Oh yeah, that scene with the Roach Motel.
Yep, where her arms get ripped off and then the roach arms come into place. Yeah.
So good times.
Dustin, what is your when was your involvement with this
story? The first time I saw Hellraiser was when I was getting really into horror as a genre in 2012. Previously, my dad liked to go by movies from video stores. You know, like they would rotate out their old stock of stuff and they would sell things off. And so he used to take me on those buying trips that he did. And I remember a big cutout of Pinhead for, I think it was Hellraiser 3, actually, at one of the video stores, and being kind of weirded out by the design. But I didn't see Hellraiser for at least 20 years after that. And so the first time I saw it, I was kind of expecting more of Pinhead, so I wasn't really sure how to process it. Like, it was a very different movie from anything I had ever seen before. So I kind of didn't like it the first time I saw it. But it grew on me once I had a better idea of what was actually going on and like what it was about. Which, I think you gave the weirdest synopsis of the movie I've ever heard, Dave. So it's about a box that can open the doorway to hell, essentially. And some guy named Frank finds the box and he opens it and then decides he wants out of the deal, and so he tricks his brother's wife into helping him be resurrected. And it gets pretty graphic.
Well, I was
I don't
explaining to
know.
Brandon, like when we were talking, about the difference between the novella and the movie itself. The novella explains in much more detail as to why Frank was looking for the lament configuration in the first place.
Sure.
And why he changed his mind, because he was basically looking for the 100 versions equivalent of whatever the Cenobites were offering. So when he found the limit configuration, he solves it, and it opens up the portal, the dimension. And they're like, okay, so we're going to do this. And we got all this crap waiting for you. And he's like, yeah, sure, let's do this. And so they're like, well, it's the most pleasurable thing you're looking for. I mean, that's what he was looking for. He was looking for the extreme pleasure. Like, I guess, the equivalent of the greatest blowjob in the world. Mm-hmm. And they promised him all this stuff. However, their idea of what's pleasurable is not the same as what our idea of pleasurable is.
No.
So they start it's like the opposite.
Okay.
Well,
so they
unless you're into S&M.
Well, even if you're like into that sort of thing, I'm not really sure how into it someone would be getting the skin flayed off of their body.
Right.
So they torture him to death, and he's trapped in this other dimension, which is basically hell. And Frank at some point was like, "Oh no, hell no! This is not what I signed up for. I'm not here for this shit. I'm out." So his first opportunity, when his brother's blood resurrects him at the spot where he died, he's like, I'm out. He escapes hell, essentially.
This is the real story that inspired 50 Shades of Grey.
Well, this is like 50 Shades of Grey taken to the nth degree,
You know what?
God.
What's funny is since I've been watching Alfred Hitchcock films, I found out that Tippi Hedren's granddaughter is the girl who plays in 50 Shades of Grey.
Oh yeah, Dakota Johnson. Yeah. Anyways,
Was she?
Fried egg titties.
Was she Melanie Griffith's mother?
Melanie Griffith's daughter. Yeah.
What about?
I'd forgotten about that. Well, I knew like Johnson's parentage. I'd forgotten Hedren's involvement. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
She's Melanie Griffith's mother.
Yeah.
What about you, Dane? What is your involvement in the Hellbound Heart?
Well, I tried to watch this film a few years ago, and I didn't finish it for some reason. I think what happens with me sometimes is if I have a lot going on or if my mood changes or whatever, I'll get partway into a movie and then I'll want to watch something else. And it's not that I don't want to come back to it, because I do. It's just, things happen. But the other day, it was like maybe 2 days ago, watched this in full after having gotten the awesome set that I showed off in the beginning of the episode just now from Zavi. And watched the first one and then just watched the second one right after that, or right after right before the episode started, rather. And so yeah, and I listened to like the first part of the novella because there was an audiobook on YouTube, and I need to finish the audiobook. But yeah, it was a series I'd been wanting to get into, and again, with just all the numbers of things that there are to watch, sometimes takes a while to get to something. But yeah, I'd always heard of the series. I knew it would be something new to dive into that I'd have to devote some time to and all that stuff. And I researched Clive Barker a little bit, and I think that it's a series that, well, at least from having seen the first two, I'm going to dive into the other ones as soon as I can. But it's a series that it seems like there's a very interesting mix of several things. You've got, well, obviously you've got S&M, you've got certain hidden things that happen in a very specific kind of 80s suburbia, which is all about, well, excess, but also that which people hide from their neighbors. And so you've got that. You've got the idea of, well, pain and pleasure being intermingled, but even more than that, the idea of um, going to hell basically as like the ultimate thrill, almost like a drug addiction or a thrill seeker's dream, and all of that with conventional religion, like conventional Christianity, kind of being cast aside. That, like, I love the bit in the beginning where you see all of the, I think, Catholic, specifically the Christian iconography that is outside, just seeming so irrelevant and so kind of meaningless in this particular milieu, which is very hedonistic. And then immediately then what's on the inside of this otherwise beautiful house, it's like a wreck. It's basically like a crack den on the inside. And I think that in and of itself kind of sums up the themes of the film very readily. That it's this beautiful house that really is, like, the fact that the husband is like, yeah, we can move in here. I'm like, this thing is like, I think
Some of
that
the rooms are like
even,
a condemned
well,
building.
yeah, it's like, I think even like crack addicts would be like, we can do better than this, and it just, that's what I thought. Well, that, and again, like conventional like religion, which at that time, sure, it can be kind of seen as Reagan-esque, stuffy, conservative, like a status quo, but it also is in and of itself a form of stability of sorts. And so you got that's a very key visual theme. And again, I think that we were talking about this before we went on air, but I think it's an interesting reflection of the artist because Clive Barker is gay, but he also considers himself a Christian, even though conventional Christianity doesn't really accept him as he is, or what he writes about. And so it's, again, like an interesting fusion of things, and also someone that I can relate to, somebody who doesn't fit into any specific box perfectly, and isn't really liked by either side. And it's like, well, I feel you for you, buddy. But again, I think that's such an interesting connection point there, plus the fact that the Cenobites themselves they call themselves demons to some and angels to others. And it's like, it's sort of a continuation of the ideas that H.P. Lovecraft started, of the idea that there are things in the universe beyond human understanding, and that so much of how we perceive those things, it depends on, well, what do we bring to it? Are we seeing these things as saviors of sorts, or are we scared of them, or what?
They get into that.
It's a very, oh yeah,
They get into
very
that
interesting food for
conceptually with.
thought.
They get into that conceptually with the introduction of Leviathan in the next movie,
Uh-huh.
but we'll
Oh
get to
yeah.
that later.
Hmm.
Just felt like worth bringing up.
Oh yeah, well, and obviously
otherworldly
that and also
influences.
you're right though it's visually it's something that doesn't look remotely human at all. If anything, it looks like the master control program from Tron. But it has a biblical name. The Leviathan is this great beast, that
It's a
is extremely
geometric design
powerful.
too.
Well, but again, that's such an interesting fusion there that you're blending a name that should be relatively familiar within anybody who's even got a cursory knowledge of Judeo-Christian theology, and yet this thing that has a familiar name, it's not even remotely humanoid. So
Well, when you look at the
again,
book, or the novella, sorry, when you look at the novella, there's the engineer, which we now know in movies is Leviathan, essentially.
mhm.
Although
Well, and
that's for our next episode, which is part 2.
Right.
yes, indeed.
But
But again,
but
that's an important thing to establish that you've
it
got
is.
these
It's a lot
different
to
levels of
introduce.
you got different levels of familiarity within this cultural milieu that has largely cast aside what would then be seen as some form of conventionality in favor of something that is the ultimate thrill and is again forbidden knowledge like H.P. Lovecraft, but also you've got the um, S&M on steroids in the sense of it's not just the physical flaying of the flesh, but it's also the tearing one's soul apart and something that it's like this perpetual torture that is pleasurable in some way, but also terrifying and beyond human comprehension and all that stuff. So,
Well, when you look at you talk about conventional. I mean, that's part of the issue with Frank, is that when you look at the book, the novella versus the movie and stuff, Frank is shocked, so to speak, of the appearance of the Cenobites. And that's something I wish they had really included in the movie that they don't, is how Frank was expecting one thing. He was expecting, hot Sports Illustrated models and stuff. And instead he got the Cenobites.
yeah.
So they're like, hey, well, I know you weren't expecting this. However,
He gets the Chatterer and Butterball.
But it's
surprise.
They still convinced him, like, hey, what you want is still in reach. And he's like, okay, I guess. All right, cool, let's do this. But
it's kind of a little bit like that.
It's how
that's
how it is with. Go on, Jacob.
Well, I was going to say, it just reminds me a little bit of that moment we talked about a couple weeks ago in Shazam, where he's going through all the different, the sins. It's like lust. I thought you'd be hotter, honestly. Just sort of
it's the lust from Hellraiser.
I mean that's how it is with sex in general. Like you have the very conventional, run-of-the-mill, vanilla sex, and then you have those fringe elements of where you are being tied up and you're being whipped and you're wearing a gimp outfit and you got dildos up your ass and shit like that.
Ooh.
That's kind of what the Cenobites are. Like they take it to the extreme. And Frank, for all his, hedonism and I'm looking for untold pleasures, when he is faced with that whole quote unquote extreme pleasurable whatever, he's like, you know what? Maybe I'm a bit more vanilla than I thought. And at the first opportunity, he bolts. He gets the fuck out because it's too much even for him.
What about Jacob's first experience?
I just want to quickly say how I always interpreted that was that it's pain it's pleasure so intense that it becomes pain. Was
and
how
vice
I always
versa.
interpreted that. Exactly. So I just felt like somebody should have pointed that out.
A never-ending
that
circle.
is something. Well, and that's something that it's there's a lot of just intrinsic. And here's the thing. So there is a physiological reason for why pleasure and pain are often very interconnected, is because there's a similar the areas that are of the human body that are the most sensitive are the areas from which great pain and great pleasure can be derived, often from the same stimuli. And
Mhm.
you know, there's different, you know, emotional associations with, like, let's say, you know, if you're a child and you get spanked by a parent, then it's not, it's something that's a punishment. But then, you know, if you're into being spanked, then that same action in the same area of the body in a different context, it is a different, your brain processes it differently. And you know, there are some
Yeah,
people for whom those kinds of stimuli can take on more and more extreme forms. But yeah, generally there
Mhm.
is a reason why those kinds of sensations, you know, get processed. They're very heavily intertwined. It's a little bit like, you know, when you laugh and when you cry. Many of the same physiological processes are involved.
but there's a big difference between someone playing with your clit until you can't take it no more, and someone literally skinning the flesh off your back. There's a big
Yeah,
fucking
Oh
difference
yeah,
between the two. And that's
right.
the problem with the Cenobites, is that it may have started, like, in their mind. Again, the Cenobites are operating on a whole other different plane than the rest of us. In their
Right.
mind, they're thinking, "Oh, these are pleasures," but to normal human beings, what they're doing is torture, essentially.
I do
You
like
know,
how
Mhm.
apparently the studio balked because Barker wanted to call it the Hellbound Heart, and the studio balked and said, "No, we can't do that." So I like how he suggested to call it Sadomasochist from Beyond the Grave, and they were like, "No, well,
oh,
we definitely can't do that."
Let's compromise.
Well, Jake, what
that
was
would be
your
like the
Like an
porno
Ed Wood movie.
subscription.
Jake, we haven't exactly gotten your first
Right,
impression. What
right.
was your first impression of this film?
Well, surprisingly,
Gonna
not
be
as
good.
bad as I thought it was going to be.
Huh.
So okay, this is one that I've actually been very well aware of these films for some time. The lead Cenobite, the one that apparently you don't tell Clive Barker you want to call him Pinhead, apparently, is he's kind of an iconic figure. And I remember seeing that image as a child. I remember when these films came out, it stuck in my brain. And I've always known the title. I've always had, for the longest time, had less than zero interest in watching it, but I was there. I was aware of it. It was kind of like that. Yeah. And so as I've gotten older and gotten a little more adventurous when it comes to horror and that kind of thing, I've been conflicted. Should I try this series? Should I? Maybe. But to be honest, the main reason
What is your pleasure?
I'm
me,
with that.
well, it's not this shit. That's for sure. I,
Ooh,
I, I'll be honest. The main reason I'm doing this is it
okay.
didn't feel right to skip Kim's choices completely. And full disclosure, I did only watch the first one, so I'm mainly just going to be
which
doing
is funny because the first one's the more gruesome one.
Well, yeah, well, I
I
didn't
think the
really.
second
really
one's more
missed out.
gruesome.
Yeah,
I think
but
the second
anyway,
one. I enjoyed the second one better, but I think that's just because I like the main villain a lot.
I think the second
well,
one is psychologically
The
Yeah.
second one
more
got better,
difficult.
is better story, I think.
it probably does, and if
Oh
the
yeah,
main character, I'm tempted to like. Part
You
of it
should
is,
see it.
well, I'm now feeling like I will see it eventually, but I didn't really want to watch them back to back. Like I didn't really want to do that. But I will give the film this. It's well made. I definitely felt like you could tell that this was Clive Barker's baby. I feel like you can tell that he really put a lot of work into it. I did thoroughly enjoy the music, and there were certain other aspects that I really got into. There were certain aspects I did not get into.
I wonder which one those are.
And I do think that, yeah, it was interesting. I'm glad I saw it. I don't have the extreme negative reaction that I did to when Brandon made me watch Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Oh, that was tame.
And
that movie makes me hungry.
Well, see, that's a whole other discussion there. But like I said, as we were talking when we were getting ready to, this one's a little closer to me to the first Saw, which I thought it was a good, well-made movie that had elements I didn't prefer to see, but
okay.
I saw it and I can stay with that, and I don't really feel the need to see the rest of them. This one, I actually have more interest in the second one than I do the other Saw movies. So, yeah.
The second one is a direct continuation of the first one.
Right.
Well, and it is funny because I brought up.
It expands on the concepts that you have to see the first one to kind of prepare yourself for.
Right.
Yeah, I think.
And again, I will admit, I was looking at this trivia bit, and I mentioned the one part about the sadomasochist from Beyond the Grave, rejected for the overtly sexual content. I love this part. He ultimately opened the floor to the production team to offer up their own suggestions, prompting a 60-year-old female crew member to offer up what a woman will do for a good fuck.
I love it. I love it.
I have I remember that now. I just recently bought the Scarlet Box set from Arrow that comes with Hellraiser 1, 2, 3, and a bunch of other stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember that story now.
I'll admit that last title, I'd be curious about.
Well, what's interesting about so in the 60s you have the sexual revolution continued into 70s porno chic, because like that the pornographic film genre becoming decriminalized, but also getting its own kind of artistic renaissance. And then the 80s you have the advent of home video and the less expensive production of pornography in general, thanks to videotape, but also you have the ability to indulge your sexual fantasies in a more direct fashion within your own home, at least in the burgeoning home video market, if not, the home video market, even for just violent horror films. So you've got a greater access to these things in your own home, and you also have a period of kind of renewed religious right kind of sexual repression with the Reagan administration and that kind of stuff. So it's a very interesting blend of things. And you've got and you've also got I imagine sadomasochism as a practice is far older than that, but I think some of them bringing that more to the forefront, at least in somewhat of the mainstream, would have been in the 80s. Now, I think it had more of a.
Barker would have had. I think this movie had a role in that.
That, and also for quite a while, I think for quite a while, sadomasochism had more of a direct association with the LGBTQ community than it necessarily does now, at least when it was first emerging as some, in the mainstream, and some, in terms of the awareness of it. And, the fact that Judas Priest, they revolutionized the leather and the studs and everything, which was derived from S&M shops. And because Rob Halford is gay, so there's a connection there too, in the same decade.
Well, Barker, I think Barker's work always had like this like weird sexual tint to it.
Mhm.
Because what I was trying to get to when I mentioned that I had that Scarlet Box is it includes his early short films, Salome and the Forbidden, and they're really weird. They're shot in like black and white, like negative, and there's a sequence in the Forbidden where I'm not sure what's supposed to be happening, but it is a naked man with an erection dancing to very dark, ominous music, and that goes on for about 10 minutes. And it was maybe one of the most disturbing things I'd seen.
Sounds a little bit
Ever.
like the scene in The Silence of the Lambs, but a little bit different.
Well, it also, I think that was
it is
the.
fucking proud, right in your face the entire
Well,
time.
that was what you, I guess, in the chat. I guess that's what you were saying. Reminded you of something that I might have made in terms of the black and white.
That was
Which,
before we got to that scene, yes.
Oh yeah, well, but I mean the black and white for sure. I mean, I'm I'm all for that. But
it was a retelling of Faust, supposedly.
Well,
I think a lot of what Clive Barker's stuff is that it's almost his stuff is almost supposed to make you feel almost ashamed. Like,
yes,
he knows that his stuff is kind of extreme, and so it's kind of like he wants to titillate you, but at the same time make you feel like I shouldn't be feeling this because convention says I shouldn't. Yeah. It's kind of like the first time I saw the unrated version of Caligula. I saw it with three of my I saw it with three of my friends. One of them, Jacob Brandon, was Anna. And the big orgy scene. I remember we were saying
which one?
Like one of our friends was like, he turned to us and he went, "I'm not sure if I should be just disgusted or turned on right now." Yeah. And that's exactly what Clive Barker's work does for you. You're not really sure if you're supposed to be disgusted or turned on.
He wants to introduce you to something new and disturb you with it as much as he can.
Exactly. Well, and I think good horror does that. I think good fiction does that. Like it shows you something you've never seen before, and it introduces you to a world, a sensation, or whatever that you don't really know how to feel about it. I mean, and Caligula is an interesting example because it wasn't supposed to have any, the unsimulated sex and everything. It wasn't supposed to have that. But that was because of Bob Guccione's Penthouse Pets, and by God, he was going to use them.
It's because the original producers ran out of money.
Well, and Tinto Brass wanted his and Gore Vidal did, and all that stuff. So that's its own discussion. But the point is that so again, that's a very good again historical basis, because that movie internationally came out in 1979, but in the United States got a like 1980, 81 release, and then became very popular on home video. So again, you got that as kind of laying the groundwork for something like this to come along. And keep in mind that was a big budget film with lavish sets and brilliant actors in it doing a great job. I think it's a very underrated film. It's kind of a mess, but it also is underrated. But like, so you got that as a baseline, and then you've got these other fringe elements kind of arising to the surface, and then in 89 you got Sex, Lies, and Videotape, which is all about kind of culminating all those things together within a little bit more conventional human sexual experiences, but again through the lens, quite literally the lens of the video camera, and through the lens of suburbia and all that stuff. So I mean, you can see the progression when you look at the history of this country and of film. You see the progression. Interesting that you mentioned the shame aspect, because I think you could definitely take a very strong LGBTQ reading of American Psycho, which was another work of transgressive fiction at around a little bit later than The Hellbound Heart, but it was Bret Easton Ellis who, for quite a long time, was very coy with his sexuality, and he did go out with men and women, but then eventually, only relatively recently, did he finally just say, "Yeah, okay, I'm gay." And you could definitely take that that angle with the novel's version of Patrick Bateman, how he's so seemingly so hyper masculine, and yet he's obsessed with not only his appearance but those of others. And the in both the film and the novel, the one of the people that annoys the shit out of him that he doesn't kill is the closeted gay guy. And so, you know, I think you could most definitely read that interpretation into that story. So I think that's definitely, well, that's definitely a factor within that.
I think that ties more into Patrick Bateman's homophobia, though, because as soon as he's about to strangle the guy, and he thinks he's being come on to, he's about to strangle Lewis, and Lewis thinks Patrick is coming onto him, so he kisses his hand, and Bateman just freezes, washes his hands. He's wearing gloves, by the way.
Yeah,
washes
exactly.
his hands and walks out like.
He doesn't know what to think. Yeah,
it's such a threat to his to his version of masculinity that he just cannot deal with it.
And what does he have to do? He has to return some videotapes. So see, it all ties together. But you see what I mean. You see what I mean, though. It's like with these similar writers, similar creative people working within a similar time, trying to express this side of themselves that the mainstream sees as deviant, and they themselves are inevitably internalizing at least some of it. It's no wonder why it then turns into this transgressive fiction. So,
well, we're kind of getting off topic here. Let's look at the contrast between Kirsty and Julia, and also not just the contrast between those two characters, but something that Brandon and I noticed in the first movie is the contrast of Julia in the flashbacks versus the Julia that you see in the current timeline.
Right.
Yeah.
She definitely goes through an evolution.
She seems more annoyed by her husband than actually caring about him.
Yeah, like in the flashbacks, when she first meets Frank, her makeup is even softer. Like her hair is different. She's got more natural look to her face. She seems very sweet and innocent and open. And oh, you're Larry. Oh, you're Frank. Oh, hi. And then the modern day Julia is all bitter and closed off and everything. So you have to wonder, like, damn, like that dick must have been good.
Well,
Frank is presented as like a predator and a criminal.
Yeah.
And he seduces her pretty hard. I mean, he even
they fucked on her wedding dress. That's
he got her to do that. Like, she's known him for maybe 10 minutes, and he got her to do that. I mean,
yeah. Well,
he's to have her begging that he'd stay.
Well, and he's kind of a freak on that level, but the
kind of.
Well, yeah, but I mean, it's the well, but here's the thing. So another interesting kind of sociological context there. So she's like, how old do we want to say she is? Like maybe 40 something, but like a really good 40.
In the flashbacks, I mean, because keep in mind, people looked a lot older in the movies in the 80s and 70s than they do now.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna guess
Probably
that
30.
she was 32
late 30s.
So
I'm gonna say the character is supposed to be in their 30s.
Right.
Okay, well, the point is, like, she looks like she is someone who, like, it would look weird if she were to go to, like, a singles bar or something like that, even though she has no problem picking up guys because she is, like, she's a very beautiful woman, but, like, it's such that, like, she's not a girl anymore. There's no way you would say that, you know, and so this is, again, a time of a lot of different social repressions, a lot of different return to certain puritanical ideas of womanhood and things like that. You've got a woman who is not a girl anymore, is not fun and fancy free, but is clearly longing for the kind of excitement that I'm sure she clearly had or wanted to have back then.
When you look at the difference between, like, okay, so you look at the difference between Frank versus Larry. Larry is on paper, he is that good guy. He's that guy you want your daughter to marry. Honest, sweet, wonderful, loves his daughter, and clearly
he does
loves
have
his wife.
He does have atrocious taste in interior design, as we mentioned at the start.
Well, and like I could buy them buying that house if he like explicitly said that it was like a fixer upper, or he was like
Yes, yes.
or
It was a
maybe
family home. It was a family home.
a family home. Okay,
Yeah.
well,
It was
see, because like
it belonged to his grandmother.
Yeah.
okay, well that makes a little bit more sense because like I if
Yeah,
I were
the
like
line.
if I were to remake this or whatever, then I would have it to where he was like a house flipper or something,
Yeah.
because I could buy that, but
Yeah.
the family
Yeah, well,
home the family
I can
home makes more
understand them moving into the house because it was a family home. That's why Frank's shit was there. Is that
Yeah,
it's a
but
home that him and his brother had inherited.
doing it
And
right away.
And then there's
without
that
being-
line too. He must have needed another hideout.
yeah, exactly. Like he would only Frank would only go back to that home
Mhm.
if he needed to get there for whatever reason, which is why he was there when he died ish, when he got taken to hell. But again, I look at Julia and the way that she's the difference between the Julias that we know, the flashback Julia versus the present day Julia. You have the Madonna and the whore.
Actually,
You have
Yeah.
the flashback Julia is very soft. She's very, not just soft in her looks, but soft spoken. She's very cheerful. She's nice. She's welcoming. And then the modern day Julia has that her skin is very pale, very washed out with the foundation. There's no rosiness to her cheeks except for that very extreme red rouge.
She's
Her
very
eye
cold,
makeup is
yes.
different. Even her hair is very different. She
Actually,
looks like a goddamn Mad Max video from the 80s.
There was one scene where I noticed like she's trying to wipe away the blood and it put more red in her.
Yes.
And that was intentional. And I was like, oh, that's kind of fun.
They lit her from you can tell where they lit her from above. So she's very very extreme looking.
Now, Kim, I know you're going to be the expert out of this particular group. I was looking at previous cast credits. Kitty Bennett in Pride and Prejudice was one of the youngest two, right? Am I remembering that correctly?
Kitty Bennett was the next to youngest person. Lydia Bennett was the youngest.
So Kitty Bennett was apparently this actress's first screen credit.
Yep. Pride and Prejudice. Yep.
I'm thinking that's kind of a fun. You're talking about the younger one, and I'm like, okay, yeah, there's a little bit of that naivety there, although she's definitely more sedate than Kitty was.
To be fair, the character of Kitty was a follower. She was not the type that Lydia was the wild child.
Actually, you get the impression that the early Julia was a follower, and that's why she's so easily kind of bowled over by Frank.
I could see now. This is something I wanted to just bring up in relation to that.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of this talks about corruption. A lot of the themes are corruption, about having never really what you have, never truly being enough, and it being enticing to keep going higher and higher. And with her, I could say that was a real corruption that she went through. That what she was getting after that point was never quite what she had that one night.
Well, babe, remember we were talking about
is more and more.
Remember we were talking about in the novel, the reason why Julia is even with Rory is what they refer to him as in the novel, but in the movie his name is Larry. She's with him for it's a marriage of convenience on her part. That at one point she did kind of care about him, but Larry is. I mean, come on, look at him. The contrast between him and Frank. I'm sure Larry's a sweetheart, but considering the fact that Julia's obviously looking for something more exciting, the contrast between him and Frank, it's like night and fucking day. Larry is the responsible one. He's very, family oriented. He's very, okay, let's do this by the book. And so she's with him for the obvious marriage of convenience. She's with him for the comfort aspect. But then, of course, not to get all cliche and shit, Frank awakens something deep in her loins that she never knew was there. It's called orgasm.
Or she hadn't experienced in a long time, and that's sort of the, it's this idea of trying to get that old passion back and not be relegated to, the kind of woman that is the mother who's like sexless because she's reached a certain age, or at least that's
Yeah.
what society pushes upon her. And I mean, they make that archetype very explicit in the second one, in the sense that her stepdaughter, this absolutely gorgeous young girl, and then
This
you've got
baby was never
the step,
discussed.
yeah, well, you got the stepmother, and it's like, well, you've got the evil queen and Snow White archetypes there, and they
Mhm,
make that explicit. So,
mhm,
but that's why in so many fairy tales, why older women are the antagonists. If they are the antagonists, that's why it's because of the association of
The
older women with
jealousy.
infertility and all that stuff, and the jealousy
mhm,
and all that.
It's the
But
jealousy.
that,
It's very, I mean, because you're a guy, so you may not understand this, but very often when you have the mother-daughter relationships, I mean, you see this in fiction all the time, but in real life, it's a lot scarier in real life than it is. You have these mothers who live vicariously through their daughters,
Mhm.
oh
and their
yeah,
daughters have to be very beautiful. Then, and let's say the mom used to be beautiful, or maybe she, was never beautiful. Either way, she's going to live vicariously through that child, through that daughter. With
oh yeah,
me, well, I think my mother wanted me to be this beautiful, skinny, tall, statuesque daughter, and instead she got a short, fat nerd. And so that disappointed her a lot. So someone like Julia, then yeah, she's gonna look at Kirsty, and she's gonna be like, oh well, fuck, she's gorgeous, she's in the prime of her life, she's got
mhm.
her whole life ahead of her, and I'm stuck with her damn daddy, who is boring as fuck. But
Right.
something else that I found interesting with the film, because it is such a departure from the book. In the book, the character of Kirsty, she's not Larry slash Rory's daughter. She's his coworker who's in love with him. But with the
Ah,
movie, they turn that character into Larry's daughter instead, and she's much younger actually in the movie, obviously much younger. And then the other weird thing that they hinted upon in the movie that they didn't really explore any further until the second movie, which even then they still only hinted at it, was that Frank at some point may or may not have molested Kirsty,
hmm.
which is weird.
well,
Because
he's clearly okay with incest.
well, I mean, he
Yeah,
made that comment like you remember, come to daddy, like
yeah.
whoa, like
And
what were you? What
that
were
was
you
the
getting at,
trigger
boy?
that let her know, not the fact that her father looked like he had a bad wig that was glued on or anything
No, no, no.
like
I'm
that.
talking
But
about
it was that just
before,
yeah.
before
Well, I mean,
before they killed her dad. When it was just when Frank was in his
right,
full like skinless glory,
right.
she was like, "It's me, it's Uncle Frank," and she was
Well,
like, "What the
that's
fuck?"
no. Well, I
And
mean, well, like later, that was where she realized that that her dad, quote unquote, was an imposter. Was that
yeah,
line, and that's
come to
like,
daddy.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And
Oh,
under a corrupting individual or whatever, I am intrigued by this too. As again, on early credits, Ashley Lawrence is the one that plays Kirsty.
Yeah,
Hellraiser is her first movie, but
yep.
she had two previous credits, and her immediate prior credit was on the Michael Landon series Highway to Heaven. I just I
Nice.
find that hilarious. It's
It's so 80s.
Which,
uh,
no, I mean, for
uh,
her first role, I have to say, I mean, I think she
yeah,
absolutely knocked it out of the park, and I think
yeah,
not only in terms of how she played it, but in terms of the
mhm,
writing of this character, I think she's got to be one of the best horror protagonists. Certainly one of the best female horror
mhm,
protagonists ever, because she's exceptionally brave, and she doesn't. It just seems so natural for this
mhm,
character to be brave. She's not invincible or anything, but she has no qualms about running right into danger, and for good, because
mhm.
her father's in danger, and so I
That's
mean, that
true.
I think that says a lot. That says a lot about this person, and that she and there's something about Ash's face. Like, she's got that look in her eyes that is like, even though there are these Cenobites, it's like is going to do what it takes to defeat them. And it's like, that
Mhm.
is a very powerful thing for a character to have, is that I want to say it's the those killer eyes, but I mean that's not really what I mean, because that implies like malice, but it's more so like the look of someone that, they're afraid, but they're pushing through it, and they're not going to let the extremely powerful entity get the better of them, even though they're mortal. But it's like that. When I saw that, I was like, man, and especially because this is like her first film, and I'm like, wow, this says a
Mhm.
lot about her caliber, but also the character that, she's not invincible, so she's not like, the whatever they call it, the Mary Sue equivalent. I guess that's the term now, but like she's not that, but she's also not the bimbo, and she's not the uh final girl really, and she's not the damsel in distress. So like she's just kind of her own person. And it's like, well,
She's just a
that's
normal.
really
She's
good.
just a normal. I wouldn't even call her. I mean, I actually her character type has become kind of an archetype where she's not the virginal final girl that you see in most horror movies. She's not the whore. She's not some badass who can do cartwheels in her sleep kind of thing. She's just a
No.
normal girl, or
Yeah,
young woman,
Yeah.
because she's
she's just kind of
obviously
there.
over 18. Yeah, she's just kind of there. She doesn't
Basically,
have to be
One
this
I found
extreme.
I Go ahead.
Mhm.
Now I said she
Uh,
doesn't have to be this extreme archetype. She can be her own person. Like any normal young woman will want to save her father and maybe her stepmother.
Well,
Let me know how she cares about her.
I like that there's well, there's clearly a history there, and we don't have to know all of it, but it's like we can tell by the stepmother's age, but also the Christie's age, what some of that tension would have been. And also, I found it also really refreshing that, well, for all the reasons you just said, plus I found it refreshing that Christie is someone who she to me she struck me as someone who maybe was fresh out of college and was going to be like a young professional, like getting her life together, and that kind
Mhm.
of stuff, and having a boyfriend, and like just kind of, she like not high school, not college for once. And it's like, that's kind of refreshing, but also someone that like she wants to be there for her dad, but she also wants to have her own life. She wants to get her life started, and she got a place, and she's not gonna live out of her parents' basement, which she's lucky, because nowadays a lot of people do have to do that.
Mhm.
So it's like,
Oh yeah.
that was refreshing in the writing. And well, and it signals to us, the audience, that she's a go-getter, and she wants to live independently, but she's not above familial loyalty, like a lot of people. So it's like that's good. It's like sometimes movies can get so entrenched in familiar tropes that they get so far away from the way that a lot of people really behave that it becomes ridiculous. So in this case, it's
Exactly.
like and this is a character that it's okay for her to be. I mean, I was like blown away by how beautiful this girl was, but also like how she
So is Frank.
has. Oh yeah, I mean, but like she
No, Ashton
has.
Lawrence is very beautiful. Yeah.
Oh yeah, well, but it's even beyond just pure beauty. Like she's got that look in her eyes that I think signals that she's not just a pretty face, and that she really has the strength of character that I think that's what puts her over the edge, or over the
I
top of other similar protagonists,
But Dane, like you said, I mean, how normal she was. I think that's what makes this movie great. Is the writing of the characters. They're realistic.
Yeah.
They're not these extreme archetypes. Where the obvious villain, the obvious saint, the obvious bad girl, the obvious good girl. You don't have that. You have these very realistic, complicated relationships. And I wish we had gotten to know more about the relationship between Larry and Frank, of how they became to be so separated. But at the same time, I think given their lifestyle choices, that pretty much explains why they became so, disjointed
Yeah.
is that
Mhm.
Larry is, again, they are night and day. I mean, my brothers are very much night and day. You have one brother who is very much the family guy, the church goer. He went to the military. He did, the professional thing, got an education. The other brother just like, okay, whatever, I'm gonna live my life however I want to live it. And that's how Frank and Larry are, is that Larry is the buttoned up, pencil pushing dweeb or whatever you want to call him. He's the serious one. And Frank is like, fuck it. I have an inheritance coming to me at some point. I'm just going to live my life by the seat of my damn pants. Again, he's a hedonist.
Yeah, I like Frank's line about Chrissy's father. He was already dead long before we got to him.
Exactly.
Kind of
feels like
speaks to the lifestyles and how he views him.
Exactly. Like he looks at Larry as just boring, like, because he went to college, probably he went and got a professional job, a mortgage and all that other shit. And Larry looks at that stuff kind of as meh. Not Larry, sorry.
Yeah.
Frank is like, that's not the life for me. That's not how I want to live. And Kirsty, she is your normal. I mean, she is a little girl next door-ish, but it's just like any other young woman who lost her mom at a young age and then gained a stepmom. And when you look at the flashbacks of Larry and Julia's wedding, you look at Kirsty and how she's dressed. Clearly, she's meant to be a little girl, almost, very young when Larry and Julia married. Versus, probably I'm gonna say maybe 10 years had passed, maybe at least a decade. And so,
I mean, she struck me as someone who maybe, it could be just because of they couldn't de-age someone like they can now, but like she struck me as someone who maybe at youngest maybe like 15, something like that. So, but like in other words, old enough to have had a lot of memories of her mother set in stone in her brain, such that this interloper comes along and there's going to be tension there. And especially if she's, becoming a woman herself, then that will also create more tension. So, I think that it's not like she was a little kid who barely remembers her mom and thus is able to get over it sooner,
But it's weird because like when they're moving into the house and Kirsty comes to visit, I'm not getting the tension. I mean, maybe there is some tension and difficulties there, but the way that she's talking with Julia, she's like, "Oh, did Daddy tell you?" Like they're talking. She's talking to her like normal, If she truly
they probably
Julia's kind of snappy at her though. Julia's like, "No, he didn't."
She's snappy for sure, but like
she just walked away.
Well, but think about this. I mean, when you're around family members with whom you don't always get along, to whatever extent that is, to whatever extent that is, because sometimes it can be more extreme than others. But like when you're with them to whatever degree, for the most part, to avoid conflict, you're probably going to try to put your best foot forward just to get through the day, get through the encounter. So I imagine that she's probably gotten to this place where she is able to have a civil conversation with this person that she has had tensions with in the past. But does she necessarily hate her? No, because she loves her dad and she wants her dad to not have to be alone for the rest of his life. So I imagine that she is trying to put her best foot forward, but she's never going to be her mom either, so
I
it's
think
like
everyone here can like definitely say that they've got family members. They're like, I really want to fucking talk to you, but I guess I will.
Yeah,
we're
in all
family
fairness to
reunion,
Frank,
grandma's looking.
you know what I mean, though, right? You know what I mean? It's like you are able to suck it up enough to try to connect with those people on the level that you can, in such a way that it doesn't make you want to tear their throat out or for them to want to tear your throat out. And
I got to suck it up with coworkers sometimes.
Exactly, and I think that's just the way that you get along with people that maybe you don't hate their guts, but you don't necessarily like them either. Well, and the to go back quickly to the point that you were making about how the relationships felt real and everything, yeah, that's absolutely true. The one thing I would say well, because it is a movie and you can't expostulate in the same way that you can in a novel, the characters do fit within pre-existing archetypes, but they become real people within those archetypes. And the reason why those archetypes exist in the first place is because they're common enough in real life to where, they're identifiable. Like, you can look at the stepmother and the daughter who is younger and beautiful and coming into her own sense of womanhood and everything. We know that archetype because we've seen it in fairy tales, since we were children. But there's a reason why that archetype's there. It's because it's common enough in real life to where we understand it, even if even if we weren't first introduced to it in fairy tales, we understand why it's there. So, and same with Larry. Like, he is well, it's the old there's the saying of the one that you marry versus the one you fuck, and Larry's the one that
I'm
she
sorry, what
married.
saying is that? Because I never heard that saying.
That's
Oh
new to
well,
me.
it's out there, or something to that
Well,
effect.
in
Basically, the
all
idea,
fairness,
Ah,
in all fairness to Frank, he does get under your skin.
quite literally.
literally. Yeah.
Well, but that's I don't know if that's exactly how it goes, but it's like something to that effect that there are
He
certain,
absorbs the flesh of men that
indeed.
Julia brings him to regenerate.
Well, and the
Literally.
point being that
As
there are certain people that you are with in your life that, it's like, are they marriage material or are they just a good fuck, kind of material? And that whether you're a man, woman, whatever, you'll find that there are people who they are willing to have one or the other, and they don't want to see if they can't have both in one package. And
Well, as the only woman here, I can say that we call that the good on paper guy.
yeah,
The good on paper guy is that guy who ticks all those boxes. The guy that, again, your mother, if she's got, half a brain cell, would want their dear sweet daughter to bring this guy home. That's Larry. Now, the guy that bends your back out, the guy that throws you over the back of a couch and fucks you into next week, the guy that makes you go, I have never had someone go this deep before. That's Frank.
mm-hmm.
Now, in a perfect world, you would have, basically, lady, the man version of Lady in the Streets, but a freak in the bed.
Exactly.
That's what Larry and Frank are.
Well, but
Frank
they're
is,
separated into two people instead of,
yeah,
well,
and
the ideal that you want, if you have any blood in your veins, is you would want
yeah,
some combination of the two, so that way your love can
exactly.
last. And I mean that, but again, it's like people. It's partially it's what you give the other person, but also partially what do they see in you, and what are they
A
getting out of it?
Larry in this, basically a Larry in the street and a Frank in the bed.
Exactly. Well, but then the thing is, like, you have, like, my situation where, like, I definitely tried to present myself as a good, stable catch, for my now ex fiance, and
Fuck that bitch.
present myself well to her family, who her family always treated me very well, and they always really liked me, and I've still talked to them, and they've still treated me really well.
They should know she's a hoe.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like, I tried to also
I don't
get
entirely know what happened, so I'm going to sit this out.
well. It's a long story, but like the point is that I tried to present myself as that kind of catch, but also tried to get my Frank on in as much as as much a way as I could. But then guess what? She broke off our marriage, and then this is a new bit of information. Apparently, after we went our separate ways, she immediately hooked up with someone else as if I didn't matter. So, it's like you can try to be that combination of the two, and yet it still won't necessarily work out. So it's like, I don't know, was I too much of a Larry? Was I not enough of a Frank? Was I just barking up
I'm
the
gonna
wrong
walk away
tree?
saying, that song "Get Your Freak On." I'm gonna be like, "Get your Frank on, get your
Yeah,
Frank on."
why not?
But I mean, again, that goes back to Clive Barker and his whole his whole shtick is that you have that separation of the. I mean, Larry is extremely boring, except for the fact that he likes boxing. He does like your stereotypical manly pursuits, but I mean, look at how different he and Frank are. Frank likes the extreme. Something as simple as seeing blood has Larry like, I'm
On
gonna
the
pass
floor.
out. Yeah,
Oh,
he's
Well,
like
he did
fucking
get a really deep looking cut from that.
That
So
was-
he was probably passed
we were
out.
saying that cut was bullshit.
To be fair,
That's one
Larry-
heck of a that's like an artery they got in that nail.
Well, I was
I
gonna say,
know.
like, I mean, if he
Larry-
didn't, well, in all fairness, like, if he, I mean, I've seen plenty of gruesome things in my day in movies and in real life, and I've never ever felt like I wanted to faint or whatever. Now, if I was losing blood, even if I didn't see it, I mean, I probably would feel faint just because, well, I was losing blood, losing consciousness. So I give him a little bit of a break on that level. But yeah, just the sight of it would be enough to like make him sick, which that's its own thing.
Larry,
Yeah, but like
was
Brandon and I were
kind-
joking around. Sorry, David, what was that?
I was going to say that Larry was the kind of man who was the working man, a family man, and when he came home, he would rather read a book than turn over, kiss his wife. Okay, good night, honey.
Exactly. I had a professor like that in college where he had the wife and kids at home, but he would sit there and stay in his office and tell his wife, oh, I'm meeting with graduate students, I'm doing this. But he would sit in his office and read. He was that much of a fucking nerd, and how his life was so boring. He would rather do that than to go and interact with his family. And as far as Larry, like,
that definitely wasn't me. So I mean, I'll give you that. Like when I came home, it's like I wanted to. Well, I wanted to be the what would have been. I hate to say family man because that implies children, which was not in the picture. But like
what? You don't have to have children to be the quote unquote family man.
Well, I mean, but the point is, I tried to pay attention to my significant other and to do what I thought you were supposed to do on that level prior to and in addition to getting my Frank on as much as I could. But it's like I thought again, you're hitting all the boxes there, and it's such that But you do wonder with this guy, Larry, if he ever had any kind of sexual spark in him at all. I mean, it sure doesn't seem like it, but he clearly did with his wife, because obviously he produced this knockout daughter, and so he could get it up at least a little bit.
I mean, a lot of people can get it up and fuck.
Yeah, but you know what I mean.
Later on in there, where they were actually well, he thought they were getting ready to go at it, but she was not.
Yeah.
So
well, but
I
that's I think.
Well, she was using it as a tool of manipulation to keep him from investigating the noise in the attic. And then, of course, later on, when they're in bed and she's like, okay, I got him away, he's not going to go investigate the attic. That's when she realizes that Frank was. Well, okay, so he may or may not. He may have been in the bedroom. She may have been hallucinating it and been afraid, because at some point you realize, and even I mean, Brandon and I were talking about this when we were watching it. At some point, you realize that Julia does, to a certain degree, care about Larry. But again, her care for him has limits. Like her whole plan from jump, once she realizes what's going on with Frank, and he reveals himself to her, and he says, I need flesh, I need this, I need another. Her whole plan with him was that, okay, so we're going to get you normal looking again. We're going to get you back to, the way you were. And then we're going to leave together. Like, she wasn't like, let's kill Larry and then we can go. She was like, we're going to pack up and just fucking leave. And poor Larry, would be alive, but, they'd leave him in the dust. Frank clearly had other plans, because, when push came to shove towards the end, in the climax of the fucking movie, what does Frank do? He does what he was always going to do. He fucking ditches her, betrays her, and takes her essence, of whatever you want to call it, and moves on, which is a piece of shit move to do. But again, Frank clearly did not care about Julia. He was just using her to help him get healthy again.
He did the existential / life force equivalent of hitting it and quitting it.
Yeah. Well, remember in the flashback, and this is something they showed in the flashback that you don't think about until later towards the climax of the film, when he asks her, well, what will you do? And she's like, anything. Again, it's on the it's on the eve of her fucking wedding to his brother, and she's like, I will do anything to make you stay. She's been pining away for this man for years.
Well,
and now that he's back,
time to learn what the definition of a backdoor man is. Then,
yeah, it's like she's been pining away for this man for years. And Frank again, he's been around the block many times, more times than the milkman. Frank sees he's got a rube. She has been pining away for him. She's clearly still in love with him or in awe of him or whatever it is, in lust. I don't care what you call it. And so he's like, Julia, he knows he's got her. He knew she was in love with him, but she was marrying his brother for comfort. And so when he was weakened and he needed help, who does he reach out to? Julia. Who does he manipulate and gaslight? Julia. And who does he ultimately betray?
Julia.
Exactly.
Steve. Actually,
she's a fucking idiot.
I thought of a good movie analogy when we were talking about these movies. Frank was hoping for Caligula, but the Cenobites only watched Antichrist.
Antichrist was not that bad.
That is a good analogy, though. I mean, because again, there is in that film, Antichrist, which is also very good. That is, you've got there a connection of sex and that, and also, but like she makes him ejaculate blood, and it's like, you've got like a very direct connection of pleasure and pain, and also of that's a whole other discussion, but it's like, it is a good connection there.
When I think pleasure and pain, I think all the way back to the Marquis de Sade.
Well, yeah, I mean, he's the reason. Well, he's the reason why we have the word sadism, because it's named after him. And I actually, not to get too far off topic, but like I did listen to the full audiobook of the 120 Days of Sodom that he wrote when he was in the Bastille in secret. And Sallow, the movie, which I had said was the most disturbing film I'd ever seen, and I still say that that's true, but now that I've read the book, it's like, well, the movie is like a walk in the park with the Care Bears. Like, holy shit, the book is like infinitely worse. But yeah, I mean, that's where we get the word sadism from. And the interesting thing that is a point of difference with, say, the Marquis de Sade, he was only ever concerned about his own pleasure and not that of the other person, which is, again, that's just pure sadism, or as he would have called it, libertinage. Yeah, that's what he called it. And and for him, it was not just being cruel. It was like a whole way of life. It was a whole way of seeing the world as your oyster, but like in the most extreme, most at the expense of others sense of the term, and that's just the sadism part. But S&M in its truest, healthiest form, from what I have heard from those who have partaken in it, the ideal situation for such a thing is that it is like this ultimate form of trust between the two parties, that you're having one who is the dominant and the other one who's the submissive, and that they're able to fulfill needs that they can't otherwise get in their normal either friendships or romantic relationships or whatever. And oftentimes, like, there's the stereotype of the executive who has a lot of the male executive who has a lot of weight on his shoulders in real life, who then has to feel vulnerable and his mistress is able to, his dominatrix, is able to get him to feel that, and so he gets this thing that he can't get otherwise. And so, you do have that's kind of in its idealized form, that it's this ultimate form of trust, and that's why you have safety words and everything. And then when it goes wrong, that's where you get something like 50 Shades of Grey, which becomes, abuse. And
Yeah.
so I think in this case you've got uh, more of kind of beyond the realms of your conventional S&M practitioners, or even just like your married couple that wants to add a little spice into the relationship, which is what a lot of, I'd say the majority of people that are going to be trying that's more or less what they're into. But there is a very select subset of people that fall within that larger spectrum that will put hooks into their skin and do those kinds of things. So that's where the horror aspect comes in, and then you combine that with the fact that it's supernatural, and that it's not just a physical flaying of flesh, but it's also tearing one's soul apart, and this eternal torture, and this bifurcating of a person's being, and like corrupting their former selves into a Cenobite, into a practitioner of this extreme torture and everything. It's a that's where the horror aspect comes in. But
Take a breath.
Yeah.
Okay, Dave. When are we gonna move on to the second movie?
Soon as we did we talk about music or
No.
This is a really
or
this is a pretty
special
good score.
effects, really.
Well, in both of them, really.
The scores, I do like the score with the drunk, the boom, 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 boom. It's very ominous sounding. I was a band geek, so of course I'm loving it.
Well, that was Christopher Young was the composer there, and he actually did the score for Spider-Man 3 after Danny Elfman did the first two. And the score of Spider-Man 3 actually did carry the themes of that Danny Elfman established, but I think it carried it into darker territory musically.
And he did the recent remake of Pet Sematary.
Mm-hmm.
He did the Rum
So I mean,
Diary.
he's got a decent pedigree. He's just not a household name for some reason, even
Drag
though
Me to Hell.
His scores for this one and the second one are both really good. They're very ominous, but also a little bit operatic at the same time.
Oh, I feel like the score. Now, I feel like the second one doubles down on it a bit, and we'll get to that next. But I swear this score is one of the best things about the film for me. It just it feels epic. It feels just like much bigger than everything else. And you can feel that ominousness, that just that feeling.
It feels like it adds a lot of production value.
Yeah.
Well,
a lot more than they actually did.
Well, and it helps to
the Omen's book. If you look at the Omen and you listen to the music from that movie, it's like they were trying to go for that.
Well, and it also helps to that, like, because the music is so big, it helps to make up for the fact that really, when you think about it, so when they actually go into, I don't even know if hell or the Cenobites realm, whatever you want to say, it's when they go in there, what is it mostly? It's like just a few rooms that they have. They do tend to tread the same ground multiple times, and they're clearly trying to make it seem a lot bigger than it actually is. Just given what I'm sure was the budget limitations, and the fact that most of the budget inevitably went to the costumes and the effects, of which there were many. But it's like that also helps to not have us think about that. The fact that they are having to tread the same grounds on what is clearly kind of a limited set, but it feels much larger than that.
So why don't we move to
we should hit the effects, because this has pretty amazing effecks.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
only
you
a few
can't
of
skip
them
the effects on this one. It is just the rats, because that was something that I wanted to bring up. Because it's something I learned about, because me and Kim were watching it, And she was like, I wouldn't put it past them to use real rats. I was like, probably not, because they did have a maggot and roach wrangler there. But
Mm.
apparently, they had to go to the people who were rating it because they had to convince them, no, these are not real rats. They had to take the little animatronic rats that they had and show them to those people before they would allow them to release the film.
Well, you know the reason for that is you have Cannibal Holocaust to blame for that.
Oh, Cannibal Holocaust is the
What they did
biggest
in that,
spinner.
what they did in that fucking movie, you know, you had animal rights activists that are like, okay, so let's make sure you're not actually killing rats and nailing them to a wall.
Well, and that's the thing. Like, I love Cannibal Holocaust for what it did for both the cannibal genres and having laid the groundwork for found footage. But like the the stuff that they were doing to those animals, it's like there's no way that you could have faked it. So it's like, well, that's pretty indefensible, and it's like it's not only real, but it's like actively sadistic, and it's different than in other cannibal films I've seen where there also is real animal death, but like in context, it's such that like they're doing it out of self-defense, or it's like nature footage of animals eating other animals, or they're doing it for food, or some like practical reason. But like in Cannibal Holocaust, it is like actively sadistic, and I'm like, wow, you're not helping your case at all.
I have to harken back to the beginning on what I said about that special effect between the floorboards. That to me, I will never forget as long as I live. So to me, seeing that creature mutate underneath the floorboards,
Frank's rebirth scene.
fucking big ass
All the
arms,
stop motion.
Yeah.
Used.
Well, now there's one little thing, because the effects are wonderful. One little thing that James Rolfe brought up in his review, that I couldn't help but wonder myself, is what is the formula for how much life force one has to get in order to get X amount of body back? Because it seems like with just a bit of blood that he's able to get like his skeleton, his brain, his some of his muscles back, with just that little bit of blood, and then he gets like a full human, a human full of blood, full of life force and all that, and he gets
some muscle mass.
A little bit, but
it's
like, but it's like there is a little bit of inconsistency there, and so I was like, well, what is the formula there? And with the stepmother in the second one, like there, it seems like there's a little bit more of a cause and effect as far as the fact that she does manage to successfully regenerate fully, and there was like, what was it, like 6 or 7 people that it took, so it's like you can make more of a cause and effect kind of algebraic equation in your head for this many full humans equals this amount of regeneration.
That makes Frank's line one more, maybe 2, kind of funny.
Yeah, because like there were a lot more than that. But now, granted, he is kind of new at this, so he hasn't quite gotten it down to a science. And she,
I never really done this before.
Well, yeah, but like she clearly, obviously, has done it before, so she's got a better idea of the whole thing. And and she had more of her physical form intact in the first place, so she didn't have to quite regenerate as much. But I think she also put her resources to better use, shall we say?
That note, let us do our outros.
I don't think we've talked about effects generally, but I don't think we've specifically mentioned the thing that kind of cemented this thing in my mind and most people's minds, which is specifically the makeup effects.
Yeah,
I feel like
makeup and costume design.
That. Yeah, that was very. I was impressed with the makeup effects. I will say that. It was.
See, to me,
Which,
the makeup effects are kind of gothic in design,
oh
and
yeah,
come out of a point of like latex and even the Rocky Horror Horror Musical had some aspect of sadism involved in there.
well, I
They-
mean, yeah, they're both derived from the same subsets of gay fashion at the time, that then kind of bled into the mainstream. And the interesting thing, which again, that's why I brought up the Judas Priest example, because that look derived from specifically gay S&M clothing shops that were kind of off the main street,
and
kind of hidden.
Rocky Horror Musical made it okay. So
But it's like, you get my point. It's like these things kind of build on themselves, and then like in the '80s, you had dark wave, and you had more like formal, goth music that became a thing, and so you got a fusion of those looks in the Cenobites, who you know. I've known plenty of people that are like horror fans, and also people that like gothic music and fashion and everything, and Hellraiser will definitely be a go-to for them on all those fronts. And so it's very influential on that level. Plus, I have to say, well, this is even more true in the second one, but I can't help but wonder if Silent Hill took a little bit of inspiration from the Hellraiser series, in the sense that
Probably.
well, in the sense that these Cenobites are twisted versions of humans that somehow reflect some kind of unfavorable aspect of themselves when they were human, because that's what Silent Hill does as a town, is that it kind of takes a person's life or their fears or whatever and regurgitates it back out into a nightmarish form. And you got a similar thing here, so I do wonder if there was
Not
some.
really, with the Cenobites, that's not really the case, because Clive Barker, again, we're going for the extremes. Body modification was becoming more of a thing in the 80s. So with like facial piercings and stuff, and that was becoming more I wouldn't say mainstream, but because it was still in the fringe elements of society. Like, think about the punk rock era. You got people with the mohawks, and they got like 8,000 piercings going up their right ear and stuff like that. That's what he was going for with the Cenobites. They're supposed to be like these extreme body modified things, and the fact that you can't really necessarily tell whether the Cenobites are men or women, it goes along with that.
Yeah, which I mean, and well, what I liked about the different looks, which again, it does beg the question when we get to the second one, more specifically when you see what they looked like when they were humans, in comparison to their Cenobite form. You have to wonder, like, what's the cause and effect for certain ones of them. And like, I'm thinking of the chattering teeth one, who looks like what was it, Nemesis in Resident Evil 3? That creature looks a lot like that. I imagine
I think you're
probably.
getting a little too deeply into it. I think it's just supposed to be like an extreme body modified version.
Well, I bring it up just because the fat one, the human form of him, he was fat in life, and so it's almost like, well, and then the doctor in the second one, he is like this extremely twisted version of what he was there, which is a medical sadist who is obsessed with the mind and with gaining this occult knowledge and everything, and so he's got this brain sucker thing, and it's like, it definitely reflects some characterization of theirs in their human life. At least that's what I got out of it. And but I imagine it's probably some combination of those two things. But yeah, I mean, it's you see, like, obviously the overweight one, you see the chattering teeth one without eyes really, and it's like, that's some pretty out there designs for the time.
Well, why don't we get to favorite scenes, and that way Jake can sign himself out.
Unless
I'm
you want
sure.
to see for the second one, even though he didn't see it, but you can still offer insight.
I probably will go after this. Although I just got a bit of insight. I just realized one of the movies I did see in high school that I hated is a movie directed by Clive Barker. So maybe that's interesting.
If you say Nightbreed, you are not allowed in our house anymore.
No, I saw Lord of Illusions and I did not.
Oh, that one. Yeah.
Well,
I mean, okay, yeah, I can see it. I mean, I was okay with that movie because I love Scott Bakula, but okay, I can see it.
And granted,
So-
again, this was in high school and on a youth group trip of all things. So you can imagine. And needless to say, some of the people in that group had different tastes.
Obviously. Dave, go ahead with your outros.
Alrighty.
Oh, shall we
well,
do favorite scenes, especially for Jake, because he won't be here for the next, or at least Jake's favorite scene.
I'm not really sure that I had much to offer on that. But one thing about this, it's not really a scene, but one thing that amused me to no end was one little bit of trivia, and I want to go ahead and insert this, and that was this little thing on IMDb. It says, when Clive Barker first showed this film to his mother, she cried tears of joy upon seeing her son's name in the opening credits. He leaned over and whispered that would be the happiest she would be for the next 2 hours.
I thought you were going to say she cried tears of blood because I could buy that.
I just thought that was hilarious.
I'm so happy you finally made a film. Okay, Mom, yeah, you're never going to feel that happy again for the rest of the movie.
Well, that's a little bit like it's a little bit like with Trey Parker's mom, how with like the early episodes of South Park that she was like, oh, they're so cute. Why do they have to curse? And then as the series went on and they got more, famous and wealthy and everything, she's like, oh, I think Cartman should say, hey, you fucking Jew. And it's like, Mom, and it's like, well, quite a turnaround there.
Yes.
Well, my favorite scene was what I already mentioned, the floorboard bird scene, and I'll say my outros in the next episode. So.
Yeah, I've got to pee, so I'm just gonna go. I'm gonna do that.
I'm gonna set up the link for the next show, people. So
all right,
I'll pass it on.
I'm gonna go ahead and drop out for right now because I have to go to the bathroom before the next show. So you give me like 10 minutes.
What is your YouTube channel name again? That's Kim.
He said he's doing an outro on the next show, babe.
All right, well, go ahead.
All right. So, I guess Dave signed off too.
Actually, why don't you do your outro, Jake, because you won't be here for the next one.
Oh, I was just confused because Dave signed off too. Well, if we're still live, I am Kotobuki Jake. I am co-host on Symptom Sin vs. the World, YouTube channel about physical media, and I'm sure he will tell you a great deal more about it after the next one. That's all I got tonight. I'll go ahead and leave y'all to it.
That's all I gotta say about that.
I got nothing.
I'm trying to think of like what my favorite scene of this film would have been. I mean, so many great ones. I mean, I think I might say, just off the top of my head, I think I might say when Chrissy meets the Cenobites for the first time and we really get an idea of how it works to interact with these things. Like if you're just a normal person and you're not, a thrill seeker or whatever, and it's like, they're not above a negotiation. Like it's not their preference, but it's like, that's kind of nice, that you're able to potentially, it's like they're not above reason, and it's like, well, hey, that's refreshing. You wouldn't get that out of Jason, that's for sure.
I admit I did like that too. Although
Doug Bradley has put it as you could have dinner with Pinhead.
Yeah, you could talk about the stock market in Britain, or you could talk about geopolitics and stuff. And oh, by the way, I stumbled upon your puzzle box, and I'd rather that you not make me suffer, so I'll make a deal with you. Yeah, I could imagine. I could imagine you could have a nice cup of tea with Pinhead and the rest of the Cenobites.
I'm not sure you'd want to get into politics because that can definitely get into some areas of sadomasochism.
Oh, most definitely. They're probably the Cenobites are probably abundantly familiar with quite a few congressmen.
All right. There you, Zach. So now you can take us off of the live. So
All
I guess
right.
we'll